there's a few things that I've been meaning to speak about regarding the current political situation in the United Kingdom. The effects of what's going on in the United Kingdom has far-reaching consequences into other parts of the world. So I think at this point in time, it's very important when you're speaking about the issues of the UK to actually look at it from a broader perspective and not just isolate it to what's happening in the lives of individual Britons. So the first thing I wanted to speak about was the current political institutions in the UK, which we've typically relied on over the past, let's say, 50 years, 100 years or so. The Conservatives, the Labour Party, and there are other smaller parties as well. But those are the two main ones. Just like in the US, it's mainly a two-party system. But what's risen in recent years is the Reform Party. And they've presented themselves as the alternative to the current establishment, which has failed the British population for a very long time now. They've made promises, they've not kept them. There's been scandals, there's been lies. They've not delivered on specific promises, especially around Brexit and many other issues as well. The Reform Party is spearheaded by a leader who was responsible for bringing about Brexit and is seen as the only one who is still standing for the rights, the views, the priorities of people who love this country. And they're usually labelled as far right, racist, etc. That's the quick way that people label them to try and discredit them and keep them on the fringes of society and never in the mainstream. But they're really picking up momentum. And the reason is primarily because of the discontent with the prevailing mainstream parties, i.e. Labour and the Conservatives. So what's the issue? I think before I elaborate on these political parties and the future of the UK, it's important to isolate what are the issues going on in the UK at present. So the main issue in terms of what's the main threat to the United Kingdom at present are two things, two systems, two ways of thinking, two worldviews that are contrary to the fundamental worldview that built the United Kingdom. The fundamental worldview that built the United Kingdom is right above my head, and that is Christianity. It is that we build a society where all people are treated fairly and it's guided by compassion, the rule of law, and freedom. Now, there are systems that are currently pervasive in our society that are threatening this system, and it's actually deliberately targeting Christianity and its foundation in this country. So these two systems are the radical left, as in the radical leftists, the radical liberals, not traditional liberals, but the radical ones who are proponents of most of this transgender ideology, multiculturalism. You can't criticize Islam, the ones that coined the term Islamophobia, radical, so you can't criticize radical Islam. And the second one is radical Islamism. So the two are radical left-wing ideology and radical Islamism. So radical Islamism as in a political branch of Islam that wants to establish a global caliphate, especially over the Western societies that have rejected Islam and taken on Christianity. So they do that through many ways. I'm not going to elaborate on them, but that's their plan. But what has happened is these two, supposedly, they're supposed to be opposing worldviews actually, but somehow they've made an alliance, an unconscious alliance, to work together to transform or to terraform to the United Kingdom. They want to transform the United Kingdom into something else. And what the radical leftists are doing, they're almost the bulldozers who are pushing back Christianity out of the way to make way for Islam to take its place. So you see this in what the king is currently doing in forsaking his duty to the church. He's the head of the Church of England, and yet he's promoting Islam at the time when he should be promoting Easter and celebrating the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the salvation he brought to mankind. This abandonment of Christ has led to the decline of the United Kingdom. And you see a lot of people who think that the way the United Kingdom is going to return from doom or the brink of doom is through us trying to remember some of the culturally Christian values that we need to or that we once held. But I think, and we're starting to realize now that that's not enough, because there are people who somehow, in some ways, embody those values, such as, let's say, Nigel Farage of the Reform Party. Not saying that he's overtly Christian, but at least in terms of the values that fundamentally underpin this country, he's being one of the foremost proponents that are almost the last bastion of hope or seen as the last bastion of hope to defend this. So these two ideologies are key in trying to destroy the United Kingdom by removing the Christian foundations and paving the way for a radical Islamist political establishment in this country. It's not going to happen, but they're going to get very far to the point where the people of this country are going to be pushed such to the extent that they're going to either want a revolution or it's going to turn into civil war. We want to avoid the occurrence of a civil war, and the only way to overcome it is some of the things I'm going to discuss right now. Labour and the Conservatives have lost the public trust. The Conservatives lost it over the 14 years where they didn't do what they were supposed to do regarding controlling mass illegal immigration. They kept promising, but they never delivered. Labour aren't necessarily doing much to change that either. And there's a lot of crazy things they've introduced, including terrible attacks on freedom of speech laws, locking up of Tommy Robinson and others and demonizing them, saying that they're far right, etc. When really they're just people who are pleading for the justice of people who have become victims of those who committed crimes, who were illegal immigrants. And yeah, they're targeted as racist. And that's usually the lazy label that the liberals or the radical leftists and modern liberals put on them. They're labels they put on them almost to immediately discredit anything they say. So if you're a white person who you're criticizing any immigration law or policy, you're immediately a racist. And that's the way they shut you up. They even have the power now because they've infiltrated into all the areas of society, in media, in politics, in the civil service, so that if you dare speak against the establishment, you can be imprisoned now. And there are people who have been imprisoned already just for social media posts. So the country is becoming more and more totalitarian, more and more controlling of its civilians' lives, everyday lives. And really what the government should just be an enabler, a servant to the people. And you're supposed to get out of our way and really just get on with the work of running the country rather than trying to control every aspect of society. Usually such behavior from the state is what precedes revolution. And we're at a place where we're very, very close to something like that happening, except that some true leader that sticks to his word, I dare say similar to Trump in that they're not a bureaucrat. They're not somebody who's a career politician. And this is one of the things that I think is why I have a lot of skepticism around Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. Because if you see a lot of the issues that are happening now within their party, so let's look at its structure. Its chairman is Zia Yusuf, and it had a very formidable candidate who was Rupert Lau. I'm not sure if I said his name right, but Rupert Lau. And there's currently some sort of feud going on, which has caused a rift within the party. And a lot of people are saying Nigel Farage is somebody who doesn't like competition. And so he finds a way to get rid of people who are outshining him in some sort of way. But that's not to discredit Nigel Farage's role in establishing the party, because he's obviously got political fame through a lot of his work around Brexit and other things. But nevertheless, there seems to be some sort of history of him not liking to be challenged and getting rid of people who are almost rising too far up the ranks. And a lot of people are also saying Zia Yusuf is some people say he's a Mohammedan. So he's a secret covert operative trying to destroy everything and not really allow there to be a strong, formidable force that will challenge those two forces I mentioned, radical Islamism and the radical left. And it's kind of sad because there was a lot of hope around the Reform Party, hopefully turning things around in this country or beginning that process. But we'll see how this pans out. But one of the key things that I have doubts about with the Reform Party is because their leader is somebody who has been in the political game for a long enough time to learn its tricks as well as its bad habits. And that's why you see a lot of the time he swings politically. You see when someone starts to swing left or right, or you start to think that, well, why aren't they true to the things that the core members care about, i.e. immigration? You see Nigel almost compromising in a sense because he's trying to appeal to more voters. So it's how much are you willing to sacrifice of your values in order to acquire power? But the thing about it is, I always make this statement: whatever you bow down to on the way up the mountain will control you when you get to the top. There's a lot of people who think, I'll compromise now, or I'll say what I need to say now just to be elected, like what Keir Starmer did, who openly admitted that he would say whatever it takes to win. So people who hire political strategists who say, look, you need to speak this, you need to say this, you need to say it like that. We've lost the art of leaders who just say what they think, and then the people get behind that vision and support it. And right now we have people who dance between the party line and discuss what will win votes, not what is actually needed. And there needs to be a new kind of leader, someone who might mirror some of the qualities Trump did, in that he was a businessman, very straight up, doesn't really care what people think and just says what's on his mind, annoys and ruffles some feathers. Nevertheless, it's something that is direct and people can decide whether they truly like this person or don't like them. But when you're stuck with candidates who just say, you're not sure whether they mean what they say one thing, they mean another thing, how do you decide whether you support them or not? How do you decide whether you like them or not? The only thing you tend to do is hate them, because when they do get power, they show their true colors. And that's one of the things that's been happening in this party. A lot of people are losing hope in the political establishment. So those are some of my doubts of the Reform Party. I do hope they can get their act together and this division can stop, but it won't stop unless you have a party that fundamentally has a Christian focus. So when I say a Christian focus, you're focused on the things that built this country, not just from a cultural standpoint. There's this trend now where people are calling themselves cultural Christians. You know, they want to almost dip their toe in the water, but they don't want to dive all the way in. They want to say, yes, you know, and some of these people were people who spoke against Christianity for a long time. They were formidable atheists who were anti any part of Christianity being integrated into the wider culture. They didn't want it in schools, they didn't want it anywhere. But now the culture is deteriorating and they see radical Islam taking over, and they see that their worldview has no chance of fighting off this threat. They're like, oh, all right, maybe we do need to go back to Christianity, because Christianity is the only force strong enough to subdue these wicked powers, these wicked ideologies, schools of thought. Every other ideology's philosophy is paper thin. They don't have the track record of thousands of years of enduring through successive generations. It's only something that powerful that can defeat and overcome this threat, and not just defeat it, because a lot of the political parties are focused on just attacking the problem. The Queen once said, it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. One key thing that political leaders and leaders in general need to focus on is not just on how do we just stop what the radical liberals and the radical Islamists are doing to destroy this country. No. It's not just how do we stop them, but how do we actually promote a vision of hope, a hopeful future of this country? What does that look like? How do we build that? Because you need to inspire people with hope and not just say, you know, immigration or, you know, rape gangs and all of these things. These things are very important. We need to solve them, or knife crime or all of this stuff. But you need to have a hopeful vision of the future that says, this is where I see this country. I see this country having such great potential in this area. We have great young people. We've got a great entrepreneurial spirit amongst the modern day youth. And how can we tap into that to make this country great, or great as it used to be, or even greater? We need it to be greater than it used to be, because the challenges we're facing are more cultural challenges rather than stuff that is coming from the outside. This is stuff that's happening within. But the last thing that I will say is there are people who have been locked up for trying to push back against what's happening. People like Tommy Robinson and others who are locked up just for expressing contrary views to the establishment. We need to stand up against this. We need to unite. Here's the thing. There's a lot of people who are working in isolation to try and overcome a lot of the things that are happening in this country. But the problem is, when you're isolated, it's easy to pick you off. There's always going to be more of us than more of them. There's more of the people than the establishment. And until we tap into that collective power and stop letting the higher uppers or the elites divide us, we will never have the formidable power to trample down all the things that are destroying this country. So to summarize, what are the things that this country needs in order to turn this ship around and turn it from sinking? The key thing is we need leadership that is unapologetically Christian. That's what we need. Unapologetic Christian leaders that rise up in the realms of politics, in the realms of business, in the realms that are central to how society runs. And this is what I do at Zion Age, is I raise leaders who are focused on not just focusing on one area of society, but and this is one of the problems of the modern church, especially within the West. So the model that we have is, you know, if you look around, you go to any major town or city, you'll see a cathedral, you see many churches there. And these churches were built as monuments of us celebrating and wanting our Christian heritage to endure. It was the model of Christianity we're living out now was built at a time of rest where we won. We had driven out all the paganism and whatever, and we established these churches as a symbol of this is where we want to go going forward. But the problem is we're now at a time, we're not in a time of rest anymore. We're in a time of war. So we need to pivot our focus from just that church Sunday of celebrating that we're all Christian, because that's not true anymore. There's other people who have come in with different ideologies they've not integrated into our society. They've decided that they want to actually change it and they hate our society. So what do we need to do? We realize that there's somebody who we've allowed in out of compassion and out of our Christian values. Some of it is not just that, but it's also irresponsible management of the country as well, and corruption. We need to realize that we're now in a place of war, cultural war, and we need to figure out how we're going to battle and defeat this opposition. And to defeat it doesn't mean physical violence. It doesn't mean attacking people with words. It simply means promoting a hopeful view of the future that's based on a Christian ethos. ethos, and showing these people who are trying to destroy and tear it down that we're not going to let you do it, and that if you continue in this vein, that we the people will rise up to make sure an end is put to it, and we will find a way, whether it's by raising up leaders within our communities who will stand up and stand for office and bring about the changes this country desperately needs to see. So leaders with a Christian focus are key, and also unity, because when these leaders rise up in isolation, they can be picked off easily, but when they're united, they're unstoppable. And we need people in business, in every area of society, people who can stand on their own 2 feet, who don't need support, financial support from anyone else, because they've got it themselves. And there are pictures of this in parts of the world, namely mainly America. Let's say when Trump, who funded his own election, most of it, especially within the first term, he obviously has garnered a lot of support from others since then. But initially, it was very much a lot of it funded by himself. Being a business leader, he's somebody who knows how to make decisions, how to get things done. And we don't have a lot of people like that, especially within the political class, within the civil service. It's full of people who are driven by ideology more than they are driven by the needs of the people of this country. So that's my summary. And I think there is hope in terms of the youth of this generation. They're not giving over to the lies. They're not giving into the corruption. And it's because they have no stake. They don't see a future in that. They can't buy houses. They can't afford to get all the fundamental things the last generation had to build a stable and prosperous life. They don't have those things, and it's very difficult for them to get it. So they're the people who are more championing change. They want to see the changes. They desperately need it, because if they don't get it, then they don't have a future. So I'm inviting all of you young people, if you feel like you're hopeless, join Zion Age, because that's what we're doing over here. We're raising people who are going to go into every area of society to bring about transformation. So I hope this has helped you to just maybe gain a new perspective on what's going on in this country, or just reinforce a lot of the things that you might have been feeling but didn't know how to express. But we'll be talking a lot more about these things in the coming weeks and months, and monitoring the situation in the UK. So thanks for listening, and God bless.